Hello and welcome to today's session. As always, I'm your host, Kevin Grote, Staff Systems Engineer here at VMware. Today, we're going to be looking at vRealize Operations 6.2. And specifically, we're going to be looking at things like workload rebalancing. And in fact, we have a really cool demonstration for you to learn more about what workload rebalancing does. Now, it's very important to also remember that during the session, we're going to be looking at some of the differences between workload rebalancing and distributed resource scheduling. There's been a lot of confusion early on as to whether one supersedes the other or replaces the other, but hopefully by the end of this session, you'll have a clear understanding of how to position them together and what they mean to each other inside of the infrastructure. So without any further ado, let's take a deeper look at vRealize Operations 6.2. So as we look at what's new inside of vRealize Operations 6.2, again, let me remind you about the dot release. And I feel like this kind of gets overlooked for a lot of folks. Dot releases are really typically features and fixes. And so because of that, we have to remember that, whatever we're seeing here is building into something else. And so when we're talking about a dot release, we're really talking about enhancements and things that are all about integration and making things work more smoothly. Today, we're going to do something really cool. We've got a neat demonstration around workload placement, and we're going to take a look at what workload placement means and how it aligns to distributed resource scheduling. Effectively, we've got kind of a clear scenario. Now, workload placement, we need to remember this is a key point. It integrates with distributed resource scheduling. It integrates with DRS. It is not a replacement for DRS. So what's a scenario? When would we use this? Well, so here's a problem. Workloads, more often than not, are placed suboptimally, resulting in inefficient usage of clusters and chronic resource contention inside of them. And this is stuff we've dealt with for a long time when we go out and we do our health checks and we evaluate our infrastructures. We resolve it by balancing resources, but that's difficult and it's very time consuming and it's very non-strategic. It's a super tactical way to deal with a strategic problem. So now with vRealize Ops, we're able to visualize how workloads are distributed and utilized across the environment. We're able to see trends. And so not only are we able to act tactically, we're able to think strategically. And these are very important aspects when we're talking about our virtual infrastructure. We can then take action to resolve that contention and enable performance of applications and infrastructure across all of the different spectrums. So again, like I said, workload placement and rebalancing is not a replacement for DRS. This is a better together story, right? This allows us to make virtual machines and applications very, very happy. Okay, so distributed resource scheduler is the best tool within the cluster. So once a cluster is full DRS and has limited options, vRealize Ops can help here. vRealize Ops is the best tool for between clusters. Because remember, DRS is a cluster-based technology, whereas operations is sitting above the cluster. So Ops can suggest and move VMs to underutilized clusters within a data center. And it can allow us to open up resources, thus providing more room for DRS within the cluster. So really, operations and placement and rebalancing is providing more power and a higher success ratio for distributed resource scheduler. You can also rebalance containers. This allows us to determine the best way to balance out the workload. And this gives us our move recommendations, right? Again, the whole dial thing like we had with distributed resource scheduler between the clusters, not just within the cluster. And we have a brand new out-of-the-box dashboard so that you have a clear understanding. You get to take a look at that inside of the demo today. So it's really going to give you a logic output. Where does the workload best fit? And how do we recommend and what do we do for it? Keep in mind, it cannot run at the cluster object. The input cannot run at the cluster object. That's DRS's job. So we got to keep these two things separate in our mind, but understand that they play very well together. So going back to that better together story, we see that ops determines how best to balance the clusters. They're at the highest level. It creates a rebalancing plan, and then it recommends which cluster VMs should be placed. Then vRealize Ops hands the VM cluster recommendations to Distributed Resource Scheduler. And then it leverages the vCenter DRS API down inside of the host, and then DRS determines the best host in the cluster to place the VM. So it's really kind of taking a high-level view and then double-clicking down all the way into DRS to the host. We also now have the ability to visualize workload levels of the infrastructure. So we now have this updated current object utilization widget. The old name was the capacity utilization widget. I like the new name better. So it's really partitioned into 3 zones and busted up by workload levels. So in any individual zone, like we look here inside of the optimal zone, we can see that we have workload levels. We've got the virtual machine, the host system, and the cluster compute resource. And we can see what is optimal, what is overutilized, and what is underutilized. And this will then align with our badge scores so that we have a clear vision of what's going on between these different object utilization zones. So here's a simple scenario. Basically the Robin Hood scenario where we're going to rob from the rich and give to the poor, where we see over on the right-hand side where we've got the poor represented by, overutilized host systems. Well, we've got underutilized host systems over on the other side. So we can then simply choose to run a rebalance action and move some of those VMs to the richer cluster. This gives us an end result where the infrastructure workloads are operating at an optimal level. So what do you do next? Well, there's nothing to do. Just sit back and enjoy your infrastructure because things are running as they should. So now let's go in and let's take a look at a workload rebalance and what this means, and let's have a demonstration of it right here today.
In this video, we will discuss VMware vRealize Operations Manager's Workload Placement Rebalance feature. This feature works in conjunction with and complements DRS to help VMs get the required resources they need, ensuring better performance of the environment and applications. Distributed Resource Scheduler, also known as DRS, is a well-known and proven vSphere feature that moves VMs within a cluster to ensure VMs are always running on a host with adequate resources to support it. vRealize Operations Manager's Rebalance feature moves VMs between clusters to ensure the clusters are balanced in the environment, which in the end helps DRS. Let's begin our demonstration in the Workload Utilization dashboard, where we can see how well balanced our environment truly is. The Workload Distribution widget at the top shows the workloads spread across the clusters and hosts in the environment. This is done by placing these objects onto the graph based on the amount of workload demand. In this example, we have one data center containing 2 clusters running consistently around a workload score of 69. We can quickly visualize the clusters: Production 1 and Production 2, which are quite different in nature in terms of their amount of workload. Cluster Production 1 on the far right has a high workload score of 95 and is constrained by CPU. Notice that the 3 hosts in the row below are associated with this cluster. These hosts are highly utilized and may be struggling to provide the resources needed by the VMs. Note that DRS could move VMs between these hosts to help VMs get needed resources, but there is little room left in this cluster. Therefore, this action will likely not lead to better performing VMs. On the other hand, the cluster Production 2 has a much lower workload score of 66 and has space available for VMs to run. In order to fix this, what we really need to do is to move some VMs between these 2 clusters. In any environment, keeping the clusters balanced helps to alleviate stress and reduce risk. vRealize Operations Manager's Rebalance feature helps us do just that. We simply need to go to the Data Center object, and choose the Rebalance Container action, which will generate a rebalance plan between these two clusters. Here, the plan is proposing to move a couple of large VMs from cluster production 1 to production 2 to rebalance the CPU demand. We can review the plan, and whenever ready, we can run the action to begin the movement of VMs. At any moment, if you wish to track the progress of the rebalance action, you can click this link to go to the Recent Tasks section under Administration in vRealize Operations Manager. It will take a few minutes for the rebalance action to complete. Once it's done, we can verify the results. vRealize Operations Manager has successfully rebalanced these two clusters, and they now have very similar workload levels. In addition, looking at the host systems below, since we have better distributed the workloads across the clusters, DRS has more available resources to leverage. As a result, DRS has been able to move some VMs within the clusters, due to which the hosts are more balanced across the entire data center. This concludes the demonstration of vRealize Operations Manager's Workload Placement Rebalance feature. To learn more about the capabilities of VMware vRealize Operations Manager, visit vmware.com/go/vROps. Thank you.
Thanks again for taking time with me today. Hopefully you found this information valuable as always. I look forward to talking to you again soon, and until then, be sure to reach out to your local engineering and sales teams for more information on these fantastic products and so much more. And be sure to check out the playlists here for more content regarding end-user compute, software-defined data center, mobility, storage, and software-defined networking, and more. And also, be sure to follow me on Twitter for more updates. Thanks again, have a fantastic day, and I look forward to talking to you again really soon.